All right, it's good to see everybody. My name is Sam Smidt. I'm National Director of Land Use and Protection Research at American Farmland Trust. And here we're going to talk through just one example of how climate shapes farmer decisions and then ultimately how those farmer decisions can shape a changing agricultural landscape. This is a map of the U.S. It's showing annual average precipitation. And it's looking at it, I'm sorry, real quick, is there a way to progress animations at all? I think something got mixed up here. Okay. All right, we're just gonna roll. Okay, here we go. So this is, if you can see behind the sun and the cloud, this is showing annual average precipitation for the U.S. The takeaway here is that there's an east to west trend. What we're seeing is more rain in the east, less rain in the west. You'll often hear people divide this up as a humid east and an arid west. But in terms of agriculture and agricultural production, I want to look at corn today. And so corn takes about 25 inches of rain per year. And so if you're growing corn on the east side of that line, you can do so naturally just through rain-fed production, non-irrigation. If you're growing corn west of that line, you need to do so with irrigation because there's just not enough water to grow it naturally. When we start to look at what this looks like behind the pictures, I'm sorry that it's not progressing correctly here, we actually see that this shapes the landscape in terms of the characteristics of what we see. So on the right-hand side in that dry land area, what you start to see are square shapes, and that's very characteristic of rain-fed production. On the west side, right behind those pictures, you can kind of see up in the corner, just west of Minnesota there, you'll start to see circles. And so that's showing irrigation. Circles on the landscape are irrigated production. And why they're circles is that there's a well in the middle, and then connected to that central point is a long arm, which you can see, and it pivots around. In the top left, that photo there, you can see that historically there was room for improvement in terms of water use efficiency. They're high powered, they're spraying out into the open air. There is water loss through wind drift, water's landing on the crops instead of at the root zone, it's evaporating away. And so over time, we've improved that efficiency and we've turned our center pivot systems into low energy precision applicators where they're sprinkling water along the ground. So we've become very efficient. But what I want to do is look more specifically at a place in this dryland area. This is in Illinois on that little red circle. You'll see both sides here. So this is in Mason City, Illinois, over an 8-year period. So 8 years ago in 2017, Mason City was entirely rain-fed production. You can see all those squares on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, you start to see that over time, there's been more than 30 center pivot systems installed. So what's happening here? Why is that the case? Is it because of climate or is it because of something else? Some of it can be attributed to climate. We just heard about weather extremes. I'll get more into those here in just a second. But more importantly, what we're looking at is the relationship between technology and cost of using it. And so we can start looking at the relationship between our low efficient irrigation systems, our high efficient irrigation systems, and what does that mean for the cost to the farmer. So on the y-axis here, you see cost of use. That's the cost to irrigate. On the x-axis, you see the total use, how much water we're actually using. As we start with low efficiency systems, the cost is high, so we don't use a lot of it. But as we start to improve our efficiency, we drive down the cost of that use. And so ultimately, we end up seeing more irrigation use. And so what we're seeing is a migration of irrigation out of the arid west and into the humid east. And so we can see this across the board. It's not just in Mason City, it's everywhere. We just heard from the previous panel, there's new installations in Connecticut. We see this across the board. And it's because it's becoming cheaper to use, especially when there's assistance programs in place to offset the cost of adoption. But we're getting to that point where the margins of the cost to use is starting to become economically favorable for a farmer, especially if it's only used sparingly during extreme times. So we're going to walk through this one here. This figure is it's hot off the press. It's thanks to our senior climate and ecosystem scientist, Bonnie McGill. We're going to walk through 3 different trends here. I was going to walk you through them individually, but bear with me here. So starting first, we see 3 different rows. These rows are different regions of the country. We see that we have the Northwest, we have the Southern Plains, and we have the Midwest. We also see that we have columns. These columns are decades. So this is plotting over basically 60 years of data. Each dot on this figure is the reported yield average for a county in a given year. Along the x-axis within those columns, we can see the sun and the rain. What we're seeing is that as we move to the left in that column, we have hotter, drier conditions. And as we move to the right, we actually have wetter conditions. On the y-axis, we're looking at the relationship between the yield that we would get with irrigation versus the yield that we would get without irrigation. So what you're seeing is the yield boost, the benefit we get from irrigating. So 3 trends to point out here. The first one in the top row, we want to see an increased yield difference, or that's what we are seeing, is an increased yield difference. We're seeing that we are getting better at driving up yields with irrigation. This can be because we're becoming more efficient in our water use. It could also be through other advances like new seed types or cultivars that are more adept to growing in irrigated conditions. There's a long list of reasons. Soil health would be another one. The second row here is we are seeing an increased weather variability across growing seasons. So we're seeing more spread in those dots from the left and right. And I want to point out that all of these trends are not just specific to one region. This is across the country. So this is literally the visualization of what you just heard in the last panel about how weather extremes are becoming more and more common. We're seeing the spread across that x-axis in all of the regions across the decades. The third trend that we're identifying here is that we're seeing an increased irrigation value during dry years, and that's evidenced by the negative slope across those point clusters. And what that's showing is that we're seeing a greater yield boost during dry years. So a farmer in Illinois, for example, that Mason City, even if we're not using irrigation all the time to produce corn or produce our crops, because we're seeing more extreme, because we're seeing extreme weather, because we're seeing more value out of that irrigation, we're starting to see more and more adoption of irrigation practices. So you can start to see how this can become very complicated. We know that climate drives technology innovation, it drives farmer decisions. Ultimately, that drives land cover and land use change. And what we're also starting to see is that change in land cover and land use is actually feeding back into changing climate. We're seeing that we're getting more precipitation downwind of places that are heavily irrigating. And so it is having feedback loops here. And this is just one example. There's no shortage of examples that we could talk about and how they all would be interconnected. And I also want to point out that this is still within the context that we're losing over 2,000 acres of farmland per day. The farmland that we're losing is not uniform. We're losing our most suitable soils first. We have an aging ownership demographic. We have an aging producer demographic, so a lot of that farmland is likely to change hands in the near future. We just heard how it's becoming increasingly more difficult to be financially viable, and there's still a wide variety of practices that we're using. So when we try to implement better practices, it takes a long time before we can see at scale these benefits come through. So there's a lot of complications going on in this research world, which is, as a researcher, a very exciting time. So from AFT research team, I just want to say how awesome it is to be working in this context. But what I want to point out is that AFT research is different than other research that potentially you see. We're mission driven. As you know, as a nonprofit, we're mission driven. And so we are very actionable in the things that we pursue. I want to point out that AFT research seeks to equip, it seeks to empower, it seeks to support our stakeholders. Ultimately, what we want to do is generate data, provide them information, so that ultimately we can achieve outcomes that allow for thriving farms and ranches. So if you'd love to talk more about research, I would love to talk to you. Let's connect after this event. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.